So we left off talking about the three states of matter, and we had started talking about gases and why gases are the way they are, and it all has to do with the kinetic molecular theory. Liquids are also related. The kinetic molecular theory says that the faster molecules are moving, the further apart they're going to be, right? The more energy they have. So we've started at the top. The fastest, most crazy molecules are the gases. Now we're stepping down a bit, and we're going to slow our molecules down a bit, which, remember, in order to get the molecules to slow down, you need to lower the temperature. So that's why gases are at high temperatures. A little bit lower of temperatures, you get a liquid version of whatever matter you happen to be dealing with. So unlike gases, liquid particles do have an attraction for each other. Remember, we had said that gas particles are not attracted to each other. They're very far apart. These are known as intermolecular forces, okay? This attraction between the molecules. So these molecules are moving, but it's not enough to escape the intermolecular forces to turn into a gas. They are stuck together like little magnets, okay? It's not so much stuck together that they can't move at all, which is what a solid is. It's just stuck together and they just sort of slide past each other, okay? Liquids flow because of these intermolecular forces, and the stronger the intermolecular force that a particular substance has, the higher the viscosity. In other words, it's thicker. So think about oil. Viscosity can be reduced when heated. If you had really cold oil, it kind of flows, maybe kind of like maple syrup. But if you heat up oil, then it flows a lot more quickly because it's weakening those intermolecular forces, and it's able to flow a lot more quickly and a lot faster. So there are different types of intermolecular forces that you need to know about, keeping in mind that the word intermolecular, means between. So we're talking about attraction or forces between two molecules, two separate molecules, two particles. The three types are London dispersion forces, dipole-dipole forces, and hydrogen bonding. And so we're going to take a look at each one of these intermolecular forces one at a time. So first up is London dispersion forces. In LDF, or London dispersion forces, basically the electrons pile up on one end of the molecule and give it a temporary polarity. So let's take a look at a picture here. Here we have, at the very beginning, two molecules that are right next to each other. Temporarily, some electrons, which are negatively charged, pile up on one end of the molecule over here. Okay? And so now you can see what they're trying to show here is a positive end of the molecule pointing towards the negative end of the molecule. And this one still remains the same. Well, when this happens, now all of a sudden, it sort of makes it happen in another molecule nearby. And so now we have a positive and a negative end on this molecule, a positive end and a negative end on this molecule. And we all know that opposites are attracted to each other right here. Okay? So this positive is attracted to this negative, and that attraction right there is called the London dispersion force. And the thing about London dispersion forces is it's temporary. Okay, it's a very temporary thing. It happens for that long, and then it's over, and then it happens again. And we're talking, remember, about billions and billions and billions of molecules in a sample. So this is happening all over the place, multiple times per second. Okay, so it's different substances exhibit different London dispersion forces, or different amounts of London dispersion forces. Some don't have any at all. Dipole-dipole forces are different from LDF because a dipole is a permanent force. Okay, so here's our dipole. You can see here hydrogen and chlorine have a strong, what's known as a covalent bond. We'll learn later what that is, but it's a very strong bond. So we have a plus end and a minus end, and here's another molecule nearby that also has a plus end and a minus end. And so this attraction, again, right here is the dipole-dipole force. Okay? And you can see an example right here of all the different molecules near each other. Sometimes they're attracted to more than one molecule at the same time. So what this means is simply that it's going to be harder to turn this substance into a gas, right? Because in order for something to turn into a gas, the molecules have to be far apart and separate from each other. Well, if you have two molecules that are attracted to each other and want to be together due to dipole-dipole forces, then it's going to be harder to pull those apart, right? And therefore, the boiling point, or the point at which we can get something to turn into a gas, is going to be higher than something that doesn't have dipole-dipole forces. Okay, if you don't have dipole-dipole forces, then the molecules can freely separate, and so they can turn into a gas very easily. Finally, we have hydrogen bonding, and this is the strongest of the intermolecular forces. Notice I put them in order from weakest to strongest. So this is going to have the biggest impact on the boiling point. When hydrogen is bonded to fluorine, oxygen, or nitrogen, so this is how I remember it, phone, okay, hydrogen bonding, hello, hydrogen bonding, this is a phone, then you have hydrogen bonding existing, basically. So here's an example of hydrogen bonding. We have water, a water molecule, so it's hydrogen bonded to oxygen. That's one of our options. Remember, our options are fluorine, oxygen, or nitrogen. If it's bonded to one of those and you have hydrogen bonded to one of those, then you're going to have hydrogen bonding, which is the same idea as all the other ones. It's an attraction between the positively charged hydrogen atom and the negatively charged oxygen atom in this case, okay? So it's between molecules, it's intermolecular. Remember, inter means between. So there is an example of a hydrogen bond. Again, it's going to make it more difficult for those molecules to separate and turn into a gas. And so that's what these intermolecular forces play an impact on, or have an impact on. Let's finish up by talking about solids. Okay, so we've talked about gases and we talked about liquids. Now we're going to talk about solids. And all of the difference between all of these things has to do with the kinetic molecular theory and how fast the molecules are moving. They're not moving very rapidly in a solid. They're sort of locked into position and very organized. We saw a picture of that earlier. Remember this slide back here where the solid just kind of jiggles a little bit. We talked about the liquids that are a little more crazy, and then the gases, which are super crazy. Okay, so we're talking about the solids right now, which just are locked into position and are just sort of jiggling around. I kind of think of them as the freshmen at a dance. They're just standing on the wall and they just kind of jiggle back and forth like this. Okay, as you get older, then you start to turn into a liquid and you start to turn into a gas. The seniors are the gases. They're bouncing all over the place at the dance. So since they're all organized into this crystal lattice, or lattice, a solid has a melting point, or the point at which it will turn into a liquid. They're all locked into position, right? If they are given enough energy that they start moving fast enough to break apart, then you now have a liquid, and so that's why that's called the melting point. Ionic solids, when you have a metal bonded to a non-metal, that's an ionic solid. Those have very high melting points because they're really attracted to each other. They do not want to pull apart. So it takes a lot of energy to get those molecules to separate. A molecular solid has a very low melting point because when you have two non-metals bonded to each other, then those molecules are relatively easy to separate and easy to melt. So like we said, most solids form crystals or are crystalline, like salt, okay, sodium chloride. It's a very organized fashion. But some solids have more than one form. It's not necessarily one particular crystal. And we're going to do a lab using some sulfur and take a look at 3 different allotropes. Okay, that's when a solid has more than one form. And an allotrope basically is different organizations of the molecules or of the atoms, but it's the same substance. Another example of an allotrope would be pure carbon. Okay, diamond is pure carbon, but so is graphite. Graphite is what we have in a pencil lead. Okay, that's what it's made of. So diamond, very valuable, the hardest substance. You can cut glass with diamonds. Your pencil lead, not so much, but those are exactly the same substance. The difference is the way the atoms are arranged in the substance. And those are created under different conditions like heat and pressure. So hypothetically, you could throw your pencil out in the backyard, bury it, come back 1,000,000 years from now, and it would be a diamond. Awesome. Okay, plan for the future. Not all solids are crystal, though. There is another type of solid known as an amorphous solid, morph meaning shape. So an amorphous solid has no ordered internal structure. It's not organized into a grid in any way. And so some examples of solids that aren't organized like that would be rubber, plastic, asphalt, glass. Okay, think about something that's made of rubber. It is solid, but it's flexible and it's not organized. Same with plastic. So if we're looking at a picture here of the three states of matter, you can see gas. It should show like a molecule in there just sort of floating around. We have a couple molecules floating around. Liquid, they're just jumbled together, okay, and they're able to move and flow past each other. And then, of course, the solid, they're organized into a very organized pattern, okay? So when you go from one state to another, that's called a state change or a phase change. So you need to copy down this slide here and realize that these are the different states of matter, and changing between the different states of matter has different names. For example, if you melt something, you're going from a solid to a liquid. And notice there's another special little name there for melting. It's also called fusion. A lot of them are easy to remember because you know that when you go from a liquid to a solid, just remember water. You take some water, you put it in the freezer, it's turning into a solid, it's freezing. Okay, it's the same for anything. Some of them are a little harder to remember. You may not know about sublimation or subliming. That's going from a solid to a gas. Dry ice is an example of sublimation. It's a block of carbon dioxide, frozen carbon dioxide, and it turns immediately into a gas. There is no liquid state. It skips right over the liquid state. Okay? Evaporation occurs at the surface of the liquid. Okay? They're basically the molecules are constantly moving, and some just get up just enough energy to jump off the surface of the liquid and turn into a gas. That's why water doesn't stay on the driveway when you hose it off, okay? It eventually evaporates. The water is not boiling. It is not vaporizing in that case. Vaporization is a different thing that we're going to talk about in a second. Vaporization is when all of the liquid is turning into a gas at the same time, and that occurs at the boiling point. Okay? Evaporation will happen faster on a hot day because the molecules are moving faster, so they're more likely to turn into a gas. We use evaporation as a cooling process. When you sweat, it takes the heat away as the water evaporates. If you've ever jumped into a pool on a warm day and you get out and the wind's kind of blowing, you kind of feel cold, and that's because all the water is evaporating from your body all at the same time and taking the liquid with it. So vaporization, on the other hand, is when a liquid is heated entirely throughout and then it reaches its boiling point, okay? Because the vapor pressure, the pressure pushing out, is equal to the external pressure, or the pressure pushing back down on the liquid. Because remember, the atmospheric pressure also exerts a pressure. So at the boiling point, that's when the gas is going to basically all happen at the same time. All of the liquid is going to turn into a gas. And that's why we call it vaporization. Normal boiling point is at 101.3 kilopascals. Remember, that's sea level air pressure. As you go up in elevation, then the boiling point is going to drop, and as you go down in elevation, the boiling point is going to go up, which is why water boils at 95 degrees Celsius in Denver. It normally boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Here in Valley Center, we're up elevated a little bit. It might boil at 99.5 degrees Celsius, okay, because there's less pressure holding that liquid back, and so it can all jump up and turn into a gas. Finally, we have a phase diagram, which is a chart that shows the conditions at which a substance will exist as a solid, liquid, or a gas. The triple point is where all three phases can exist. Sublimation, as we know, goes from solid to vapor. And the critical point on the phase diagram is when nothing but a gas phase can exist. So let's take a look at a phase diagram for water. So basically this is what it looks like, and you have here the critical point. So remember, above the critical point nothing can exist except a gas. The normal boiling point would be at 100 degrees Celsius for water and 1 atmosphere, because remember, 101.3 kilopascals, 1 atmosphere, that's the same thing. So this is just a chart that shows all of the different states of matter under the different conditions. As you raise the temperature, so if I raise the temperature a little bit, then I'm going to increase my boiling point. right? You can see that it goes up here to cross. So if we raise the temperature up to 300 Kelvin, then the boiling point will also increase. Okay, so I want you to copy this down on your notes and make sure that you have this ready for class.